This conference will now be recorded.
Before I go over a couple of introductory slides, I'm going to hand it off to Melissa Copps, who is our vice chair, and she is going to kick off some brief introductions so we all get to sort of meet each other on the session. You will have to unmute yourself for that part, and then just reminder to mute your mic right after so we can, while Tony's presenting. Please do feel free to use the chat during the session. A few of you have already done that. I'm going to be monitoring that for questions and feedbacks. There's going to be natural breaks, and we'll check in with the chat at that point, and there will be an open discussion at the end. We're always interested in questions or feedback on anything you may hear today or anything about our organization. So the easiest way is to email me at the executive director at ctgbc.org below. Okay.
All right. Well, I'm going to start off. We want to do really brief introductions, and I'll model what we want. So I'm Melissa Copps. I'm an architect at Peary Associates in New Haven, Connecticut, and I'm a board member of the Connecticut Green Building Council and co-facilitator of the Living Future Collaborative in Connecticut. I'm going to go down the list, and I'm going to have everybody, I'm going to call you out, and I'll unmute you, and then you'll say your name, your company, and your location. So I'm going to start with Tony, who's our presenter.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll make sure I'm unmuted here. Good. So Tony Hands with CMTA. So I, Vice President with CMTA, I lead a lot of our zero energy projects, typically focused on the first 30% of the project and trying to get that project to stay on track to accomplishing its goals.
All right, next, Amy Musanti.
Good afternoon, Amy Musanti, the Director of Sustainability for ASA ABLE Americas based in New Haven, Connecticut.
Thanks. Next, Bill Nair. Sorry, I'm trying to.
Bill Gennari, Interval Data Systems. We're in the business of monitoring operations of buildings in terms of BAS operations and utility data.
Thank you. Next, there's somebody that's caller 1. Who is that? Okay.
Hello. This is Ilona. I don't know. I'm in a car, so I may be caller 1.
Okay. Yep. Thank you, Ilona. Next is Dominic DiCenzo. You have to unmute yourself.
I thought you said you were. Dominic DiCenzo, Executive Director, Connecticut Ready Mix Concrete Association's Connecticut Concrete Promotion Council. I represent all the ready mix concrete suppliers in the state, and you probably have heard of me and Tony from our Net Zero Schools presentation with the Connecticut AIA back at the end of January. Thank you for having me.
All right, thanks. Next is Eric Jabrian. You're muted. I'm trying to unmute you, but I can't. Okay, go ahead. Eric. All right, we're not hearing Eric. We're going to move on to Jillian. All right, we didn't hear you, Jillian, unfortunately. But that's Jillian Corley from Eversource in Connecticut. Next is Jim Armstrong.
Hello, I'm Jim Armstrong. I'm the business development leader for Siemens for the Northeast US. We have an office in Cromwell, so we do a lot of work with schools in Connecticut from the building automation side.
Next is Julia Farber. Oops, there we go. Julia.
Hi, Julia Farber from LeGrand. I'm with the AV team, formerly of the sustainability team, and we are a local manufacturer here in Connecticut.
Thank you, Julia. Next is Katie Simons.
Hi, I'm Katie Simons. I'm an architect with ID3A in Glastonbury, Connecticut. My daughter and I are very interested in net zero schools.
Thank you. Okay, Kyle Cruz.
Hello, my name is Kyle Cruz. I'm an architect with Amenta Emma Architects in Hartford, Connecticut. I'm part of our sustainability committee.
Leslie Saunders.
This is good practice for
Sorry.
people for the roundtable discussion.
I was muted. Sorry about that.
No, it's fine.
So my name's Leslie Saunders. I'm Vice President of e-business and customer centricity for ASSA ABLOY, but I also work very closely with Amy Musanti, and I'm very interested in hearing what's going to be said about net zero schools.
Michael Sam.
Hi, this is Mike Som with Energy Analytics, mechanical engineer. I'm involved in a lot of municipal scale, including schools, energy performance contract work. I do R&D for the U.S. Department of Energy. I'm a lead accredited professional, and net zero energy has been a passion of mine for a very, very long time.
Right.
Michael Tyre.
Hey, I'm Michael Tyre. I'm a principal with Amenta Emma Architects and leader of our sustainability committee.
Morgan Cassidy.
Hi, everyone. This is Morgan. I'm also with ASSA ABLOY out of New Haven, and I'm a sustainability specialist. So thanks for having me.
Nancy Bauer.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hi, Nancy Bauer. I'm with Roundable. I'm a director of marketing, but working for a lot on for sustainability initiatives as well. Located in New Haven.
Nora Rizzo.
Hi, Nora Rizzo, Director of Sustainability at Fusco. In New Haven, I work with Nancy. If you didn't hear that, she's our Director of Marketing. I'm also co-facilitator with Melissa of the Living Future Collaborative, as well as a CTGBC board member.
Ross Spiegel.
See, I can actually flip my microphone up and down so I don't have to unmute myself. Good afternoon, everyone. Ross Spiegel with the SLAM Collaborative in Glastonbury, Connecticut, specification coordinator and a member of the Green Team, and this year the chair of CTGBC. Thanks.
Sherry Dieso. You have to unmute yourself.
Okay. Sherry DSO. I am an architect and green building consultant, Bryant DSO, and I'm on the Connecticut Green Building Council board.
Stephen Orlansky.
I'm Stephen Orlansky, a principal and architect with Newman Architects in New Haven and Washington, D.C.
Tom Prietti.
That was pretty good. The name's Tom Proietti. I'm with Flowtech. We are regional reps for HVAC components. We're also the New England reps for air acuity facility monitoring, which has been involved in several net zero school buildings around the country and in New England.
All right, we're done. We got through it. So I think we can go ahead and get through our next slides, Alicia.
Thanks, Melissa. I just want to say, for those of you, that was great practice. This is designed to be a very dynamic presentation, emphasis on roundtable. So there will be lots of time at the end for questions. So that was great practice on unmuting and muting. I did get something from Jillian at Eversource, who said that her introduction is that she's with Eversource and it was pretty noisy where she was. So that's why she used the chat. That was a good idea. Okay, so let's see. I'm using my thing on my computer and it's not working. So that's not good. Melissa, can you advance to the next slide, please?
Yes.
So before we focus on schools, we just wanted to give you a sneak peek of some other things that we have coming up. We add events all the time. Later on this month, we're doing a program on the latest developments and strategies for Connecticut regarding commercial solar. So that's also going to be just full of all kinds of everything you need to know about commercial solar. We're doing a program in August, Introduction to Just 2.0. We're pretty excited about that. That's a new curriculum that we're going to be I think Melissa Kops is in the queue for that. And then September, we're putting buildings to work for you, the business case for healthy buildings, followed by our 14th annual Green Building Awards in October. We're extremely excited about that. We have a great keynote speaker lined up for that. And also going to be talking about healthy buildings. And then every month we have a very active and vibrant advocacy committee. Anybody and everyone is welcome to participate on monthly calls. And as well as our Green Homes Committee is also has an active monthly meeting. You can go to the next slide. Stay tuned for updates. I should really let Melissa say a few words about this, but this is one of our bigger events that we do every 2 years. NSBE, it stands for Northeast Summit for a Sustainable Built Environment. And the theme for next spring is Climate Justice and Action, which is, of course, at the top of many people's minds at this point in time. So stay tuned for updates. And again, we invite anybody who's interested to contact us for ways to be involved with the planning for that event. And that's really it. Check us out. Learn, engage, make a difference, join us. Go to our website. If you're not already signed up for our digital newsletters and e-blasts, that's a great way to stay up to date with our events. And we always welcome people supporting us through membership. And you get wonderful benefits, including discounts to events, and again, all kinds of ways to get involved and make a difference. So thanks very much. And I think we're ready to roll.
All right, I'm making Tony the presenter here. Perfect. So Tony, you have to unmute yourself.
All right, so we're gonna go to, hopefully this is the first slide and you guys can see this slide.
Yep.
Love it when technology comes together. So, you know, the first thing I'll start out with is two things. One, you know, everybody started at the beginning of this as saying we're all in this together. And I think this is an example of that, right? I mean, just what you guys are doing in the Connecticut chapter and bringing people together and talking about the things that we're all passionate about, talking about the things that advances building design. It's just a great example of all of us being in this together. I feel like if I'm not on a webinar, if I'm not watching YouTube to learn how to do something, then I'm really just not advancing myself. And hopefully we're all lifelong learners in this. So this was put together by the Connecticut chapter to be a roundtable. At first, I sort of asked Melissa and Alicia, I'm questioning the roundtable discussion. Who are the other panelists? And it's really all of you guys. It's all of you who are experts in what you do, who are the other panelists. The whole discussion was to create a roundtable of all of us to come together and talk about this topic of zero energy buildings and where design is advancing towards and how it's being achieved, and to start having discussions about that. So I would love for this to be that open discussion. It's a little bit tricky with technology, right? We're all not sitting in the same room and smiling at each other. But I think that at the same time, I'm going to try to stop very often. I would love to have a lot of discussion and questions asked during those breaks. And I think at the same time, you can chat and hit the questions, and we can hit all those at that point as well. But at the end of this, if this is more of a dynamic presentation and conversation, I think that we'll all get a lot more out of it. I'd love to meet you guys where you're at and have that as a goal. So with that, I'll jump in. You've heard a little bit about CMTA and what we do. This is exactly what we do. We're actually, these numbers are off. We're at just over 4.5 million square feet of zero energy buildings. We call zero energy capable buildings, buildings that have an operating EUI of 35 kilobtu's per square foot per year, or yes, that number is actually over 200. We're in the middle. During this COVID piece, I've challenged my team and some of our offices to look internally at things that we do. And one of the things we're doing a much better job of is databasing our analytics. And so we did hit over 200 on buildings that are under 335 EUI. I think there's two secrets to zero energy building, and the biggest secret is drastic low energy consumption within budget. You always have to focus on energy efficiency before you focus on renewable energy. So we're going to focus on this 120 low EUI buildings. And then I'm also proud of the 50 megawatts of renewable power. We don't design renewable power for utility scale installations, things like that. We just have a lot of buildings with a lot of owners who see the value of putting a renewable solution on the building. And so many buildings have done that we've surpassed the 50 megawatt version. So a little bit of the history. Discussions of where we would like to go today. I'd like to talk, just like the abstract and the lessons learned talked about, I'd like to talk about, why are there not more zero energy buildings? If this is so easy, why aren't we heading that way? Where's the filters coming in? We'd like to look at successful energy reduction strategies. Where are we really maximizing efficiency and controlling costs? Pull out some lessons learned, and then I'd like to get into some real-time zero energy building discussion and talk through that. Anybody out there, any things that I'm missing that you would like to hear about, add those to the chat. And when we get to a quick break, we'll see if we can't find an option to hit those added agenda items in the next hour. So with that, we'll talk about zero energy buildings and just the nationwide growth that we're seeing in this building sector. This is my favorite sort of building evolution to talk about. I'm in my 24th year of designing buildings, and I think that we've really evolved to where we're looking at performance-based goals. And it took a really long time for the building industry to get there, but the owner and the user of the building have become so educated on building sciences that they're looking for true performance-based goals, and that's filtered back into design. Zero energy, zero carbon, health and wellness components are all proof of that. And rather than hitting things that are just focused on design, rather than blaming it on construction and operation, we're really evolving into how did this truly perform? How do we use that, plug that back into design, and get buildings to how do we improve the built environment component? So New Buildings Institute is the clearinghouse and has been for zero energy buildings. They are Ralph and his group does a great job of sort of evaluating zero energy buildings, getting data on that, and they do it for free. This isn't a certification you have to pay for, so it is one of the items I'm a fan of. And they've seen a 700% growth in what they call zero energy projects. I will also note that a lot of them are up in the Northeast. So you can go to that and look at the projects in Connecticut and Massachusetts and the New England area. There's very, very few. And so, and I think part of that is some of the challenges we're seeing in building performance. There is a huge growth in the school section, but we're seeing a lot of growth in the office section. Personally, our two of our headquarter buildings, so we're at 20,000 square foot in this building, we're at 25,000 square foot in the other building, and about 185 occupants. And we made the choice to go zero energy as a financial decision because the return on investment was just over 4 years. And so we're getting about a 23% rate of return on going zero energy. And I don't have any other place I can put my money and get a 23% rate of return. I don't know about you guys. So I thought that was a great way to, as an owner, to invest. We're seeing a lot of office building, office headquarters that are moving that direction for those reasons. And the other thing that we've just seen a big push for is government buildings, civic buildings. So in the 4.5 million, we're not counting a building that is headed that direction. We're in the middle of conceptual plans for Fort Lauderdale and Broward County. They're doing a 1 million square foot new government campus, and they're taking it all 100% zero energy. But that is not far enough and along to see that it's definitely going to happen. So we didn't count it. But it's good to see civic buildings heading that direction. New civic building in DC, another one in Arlington that are 100% zero energy, a new community center that's getting ready to open. So good push in that. But the thing that is challenging and sort of hidden in the numbers is the difference between emerging projects and verified projects. So verified projects performed zero energy. The energy consumption was low, the production was higher than what they consumed in a year. And you'll see that over the last 5 years, that number has grown, 12 in this year, 20 in the next 2 years, another 14 in the next. So very slow growth in the verified zero energy projects. The emerging projects are projects that are saying they want to go zero energy, and they're starting out in design as zero energy projects. And what's been interesting, and I've talked to MBI and a lot of other groups about, is what's happening to all these projects. How are there 415 projects in 2018 that were wanting to go zero energy, but then in 2019 and now in 2020, there's very few that emerged as verified. And so where are all the problems? And we'll call them filters. What are the filters that have kept projects from achieving zero energy? We sort of built this representative to our experiences on what part of the process clogged up the zero energy goal and kept it from happening. And it's about a 20-to-1 ratio. You start out with about 20 projects, and we feel like there's initially a goal setting discussion that has to happen. And if you can get the owner to write into their owner project requirements, really, if you can get the owner to write it into their RFQ that they want to achieve a zero energy building, they want to see if that's financially possible, then that greatly enhances the chance of that project going to zero energy. And so that evolution has been big. I would say for the first 6 to 8 years of the last 12 years of us designing zero energy buildings, the first 6 to 8 years, none of those projects started out zero energy. They all started with a project where the owner wanted to achieve the maximum sustainable goal they could within their budget. And it just so happened that zero energy was that goal that was achieved. Secondly, this is a problem on every project, estimating and value engineering, right? It doesn't matter what your goal is on a project. Often those goals are thrown out as soon as you hit an estimating and VE stage. We see that as being a huge filter in zero energy because many of the builders, many of the operators are unfamiliar, and with unfamiliarity comes confusion, assumption of costs, and it's always the first thing to go. And so how do you set that as a primary goal and then make decisions based on those primary goals as you go through the process? I would say commissioning, a little bit in construction. There's some construction details with the envelope that we have some major issues with, but particularly commissioning. The majority of commissioning has evolved into just a double check of some of the design components. And what we like to look at is true building optimization rather than commissioning. So a typical commissioning RFP will have where 25% of the energy using equipment is checked and verified. What about the other 75%? Those aren't things we're worried about. So we really like to look at how do we optimize the entire system throughout the building. The metering component is crucial. How do you tie in those meters so that you can get good real-time data so you can find out, it's not going to be if, it's going to be when you have issues with the building and components that are not performing. So diving into those details, we see very few problems in operations. I think there's a myth out there about, well, we designed the building to be zero energy, but the owner just didn't use it correctly. We in our 4.5 million square feet, we had a car dealership in Oregon. There was a Toyota dealership, fantastic zero energy project. And come to find out, one of the biggest issues with car dealerships make all their money on maintenance. That's not an unknown fact, right? So one of the biggest issues is finding and retaining fantastic maintenance crew to work on these vehicles. And so we looked to enhance that environment, and it gets really cold in sections of Oregon. And so we went with fast closing doors, heating that space, creating a better work environment, but really sealing it up well, and then piping the exhaust systems for running cars out through the exterior. And in doing that, about 8 months into operations, a new owner came in and said, oh no, absolutely not. We're leaving the doors open all the time. I don't know anything about these piping, these exhaust systems. So I do have that one exception where operations absolutely blew the energy budget, and that was missed. So we had to come back and have that discussion and explain the car exhaust systems and get that back in check, which we did. So any discussion out there on why are there not more zero energy projects? We want to stop for a second, talk there.
We did get a question, so I'm really glad that you stopped. So it was actually on the last slide, the zero energy filter slide. And Tom asked, would better estimating early in the project mitigate for some of the value engineering?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that having an estimator that's estimated a high performance building and having that experience with those types of systems is a big piece. I like not telling the estimator that it's a zero energy building and leaving the renewables off and just having them estimate the project without the renewables. I think that there's a myth that zero energy buildings cost more, and if we can just stay with the estimating the components, then that's been more successful. There's a slide in here that I'm going to skip to. We did a summary of the things that are different about zero energy buildings, and we listed out that the design charrettes were different. We had all these design charrettes. I'm going to talk about these. We increased our modeling, and we had to do modeling at many different steps and different kinds of modeling. We had to increase the team collaboration. Depending on experience of the design team on zero energy components, we had to increase that. There's a lot of building system integration, and there's more of an iterative process. And then I talked a little bit about the exhaustive commissioning or optimization, but talking about post-occupancy support and really following it. And then I asked the estimator, what's the cost of these components? What's the construction cost? of those things. And there really isn't a construction cost. We should be just creating a better mousetrap.
Fair enough. We've had two comments also, I think, on the dynamic or zero filter slide, and they kind of address the same issue. I mean, Ross Spiegel says, on the public side, owners are challenged to find qualified personnel to operate these high performance buildings, sort of tossing that up as an opportunity, if you will. And Jim Armstrong commented that dynamic controls of a zero energy project create many uncomfortable or uneasy building operators. So essentially, how do we resolve the level of technical skills of the building operators?
Yeah, it's a good point. I've heard of zero energy buildings that were extremely hard to operate and created a level of sophistication that required additional maintenance support. And I think that today's level, I don't want to talk as if there's a myth out there that buildings are easy to operate. Today's level of design and construction is complicated. You're creating a building that is complicated, and today's level of HVAC system control is complicated. I would look at design solutions that try to keep it simple. I would look at design solutions that try to minimize that complication. We were a zero energy consultant on a new project in Maryland, and then the commissioning agent on it. And they used a robust plug load system, and that also tied to a lighting control system, and it was networked building wide on a 106,000 square foot building. And we just recommended against it. It's just a level of complication. It was $325,000 for the system as an adder, and it didn't see the energy savings as there's no data out there that supported that energy savings off that system was worth that cost. And so we typically, the owner went with it. It was a mess to have commissioned. We did finally get it working correctly. It's been 4 years and the building's been running fantastically, but I don't know if that system, I'd be curious to see if that system's still running as it was designed and intended. So I think that's one piece. What else do we hear? Oh, we've got a project in Arlington, Discovery Elementary, and that owner speaks nationally about the project, and they say it's their easiest building to operate. So I think there are examples of zero energy buildings out there that are not complicated and hard to operate.
Jim's got a follow-up comment, but I think in the spirit of moving on to the next session, we can revisit this topic in the open roundtable. And then Jim and others want to unmute themselves and kind of, pick up the conversational thread there. I think that probably makes the most sense.
Yeah, sounds great. I did want to dive into both the Mansfield and Manchester public school projects. There are 3 renovations coming up in Mansfield, starting first with Buckley Elementary. I'm sorry, Manchester, starting first with Buckley Elementary with the zero energy goal, and then the new Mansfield Elementary also has a zero energy goal. And so that process there, as we talk about sort of moving into process and what is that component, is based around some of this discussion, really looking at drastic energy reduction. We've seen examples of projects in the area in the 55 and higher EUI for some new and some newly renovated educational buildings. And, we're really looking to get that EUI down in the 20 range or less to start making zero energy an affordable solution. And how we've done that is we've fallen into charrettes and intent studies on the major energy consuming components throughout the building itself. HVAC is always touted as the biggest target, but I would say that HVAC has to be tied with with envelope. And you really got to look at passive design first and start to minimize your components. You know, what I've learned in doing this is you're not going to win all the wars for very good reasons. There's going to be something inside the building design that keeps you from having drastic energy reduction in, say, lighting or in process loads or in your HVAC system or in your envelope. And so you're not going to win all those wars. So I think you have to fight all those battles so that you can, you're not going to win all those battles. So you got to fight them all so that at the end you can win the war, right? So, we're focused on those components and we create individual charrettes. We typically attack HVAC and lighting right from the beginning in terms of process, and so that we can get conceptual designs and conceptual models that do this well. I'm going to switch to this. Just got sent to me from one of our groups, and we'd finished up a design study. This has become the norm for DC public schools, and they've started putting that into their RFPs. So they will go through and let me see if I can just hit a remote and see how that looks. But they'll go through and ask for conceptual design analysis on their projects as part of the early stage of the project, just to make sure that they're setting the goal of zero energy and then maintaining that goal throughout. So this is the report we're sitting on this. This is a historical building in DC. So it's going to be a historic renovation, and yet inside their normal budget, they want to hit both zero energy and well certification. And so in that, we'll focus on an envelope analysis on the walls and the glazing, a roof analysis, a site analysis, and then some summary. And what you can see in here is we're taking 3 conceptual models and just massing models, running energy consumption components on those, looking at how, you know, what are the main parameters of the walls, what are the main parameters of the glazing, what are the metrics we're trying to hit, looking at a roof analysis for the PV and what we'll call solar prime real estate. You know, where are we not shaded on site given each of these 3 models, and what size system could we build? And then looking at HVAC system options, they're looking at the potential for good carbon reduction. DC is always worried about the potential for future carbon tax, and they do have an upcoming tax on buildings that are not performing energy efficiently in the district. And so we'll look at and do an analysis for them on how could a well field be arranged given a tight site, and how's that fit on these. And then we'll give a good, better, and best consumption matrix on those components and give a summary. And so one way just to walk through those in a conceptual phase, set goals, and then move forward with that. The zero energy charrettes themselves then break out further in design on Mansfield and the Buckley Elementary in Manchester. We moved next into kitchen design and kitchen operations, and we pushed the information technology plug load discussion until a later date, given the COVID current conditions, really sitting down and going through their existing schools, looking at existing plug load consumption and meeting with their IT and security staff and things like that. We've pushed that back a little bit. We can do that other times into design as we're moving forward, but we have focused on the kitchen design, and we've focused on a few of these. We've focused on lighting, we focused on HVAC, continued the photometrics discussion, and done the kitchen design itself. On the technology, as an example, we'll dive into, this is the one we gave DC Public Schools for their last zero energy project, just getting an understanding out to all those users so that they can meet the goals that they're trying to achieve as part of their job, keeping a robust technology system up and running, making it where it's not failing, so it's completely accessible to the students inside and outside the school, staff, things like that. So we walk through plug load reduction studies on their main technology components. What are the educational technologies used in the classroom? What's that equipment? How do we look at unoccupied shutdowns, and how do we hit the largest energy users through a building? And then we create follow-up dates to sort of check on that. Many of the IT components have to be followed up well into construction, because most IT staffs aren't ordering their equipment until the building's halfway or 2/3 of the way done with construction. So quickly in that, we're trying to achieve massive reduction in each of those components. We gave the kitchen discussion talk with the board at Buckley Elementary, so with the Manchester board on Monday night. Went over that kitchen energy reduction strategy charrette and how things that we achieved in that. And so we're looking at the goal of taking the renewable energy to become zero energy, taking it down. Early on, it was estimated at 3.2% of the budget, and right now we're around 1.3% of the budget. So trying to pull that number down so that the renewables are more affordable and achievable. And so on a recent project that was done successfully, the AIA baseline for the project showed that it needed about $5.2 million worth of PV. The average school in the district, if it were to become zero energy, they needed about 4.6. We set a goal on the project that included, is a little over 100,000 square foot building. It needed about 1.6 million worth of PV. We modeled it and pulled that down to 1.3 million through phased modeling throughout the project. And then the performance of the building ended up that it needed about 1.0, so $1 million worth of PV in terms of an actual performance piece. So that's the type of reduction we're looking for to get there. We've talked a little bit about this slide. And then I think the biggest component about cost, we could do an hour and a half on cost, and costs are always parochial on you know, how much does it cost for a good office building, school building, civic building in your region at that time. And so what we try to look back at is multiple projects throughout years for one owner in a certain area. And this is an example of a school district where some of these buildings were zero energy and designed by others, some of the blue buildings. None of them actually ended up performing zero energy. The size of the building equates to cost. And we finished 4 projects for the owner. 3 of those had the goal of zero energy and are achieving. One of them's built, it's been running for 3 years. Another one's built and it's been running for about a half year. And all of them have been running zero energy. The other 2 are on their way. And then a quick touch on health and wellness. As part of the analysis, we're always looking at how can we start to improve the educational space without adding energy consumption. And so this is the Buckley Elementary study looking at Buckley in terms of different glazing options, glazing in spandrel and cowl wall, or just glazing in spandrel. Just looking at those components as part of the renovation. We're looking at solar daylighting autonomy and really enhancing the learning space with good balanced daylight. And we're looking at minimizing annual sunlight exposure, which is really glare. And so as we do the analysis, this is fantastic. We've got really high SDAs, but there's just way too much glare in the space. So we'll run these going through on saying, okay, different wall systems and different components, how do they perform compared to others, and what can we cut out? And then what's the cost implications of those? So running it both on the south wall and the north facing classrooms there at Buckley. And then this is just a screenshot because this was finalized as we got into COVID. And so this is the Manchester board and us doing final reviews with the maintenance staff, with the architects. TSKP, Tyson Chem Partners, is doing a fantastic job in the collaboration here, and you know, where we're going with the selections and the components. I wanted to touch on one other piece, and then we'll do a break real quick. But one of the things that we're striving hard to do is to focus on the envelope itself and give multiple envelope options, and really interlace with the architectural design of the building. So this is the first zero energy educational building in Florida. It just passed its first year. It's a small high school. It's a STEM school, you know, based in a huge data intensive sensor park. The majority of the sensors that are going into Teslas, into Fitbits, everything is open source technology, and they've created a worldwide hub for companies to share that technology in a space called Neo City down just south of Orlando. And the school district had a great idea of landing a high school, a STEM school, right in the middle of that. And so we said, well, we think that that's fantastic, but if you're going to tie to technology, we think in budget you can afford to be zero energy, and we were lucky enough to pull that off. But in the process, we evaluated the way they had typically built buildings. They had been using steel framing. There was a discussion about carbon and moving to wood, and a discussion about moving to concrete. And this building ended up going full concrete as a sandwiched panel system. But you know, our push was, let's stay in cost. Let's really drive down air infiltration while increasing the enhanced thermal envelope of the wall system. And so we look at the metrics to see how to do that. And you know, this shows that there was a previous code that mandated a 0.6 CFM per square foot at 75 Pascal. So basically what that means is the building is allowed to have 600 square foot of open leaking airspace in 1,000 square foot of envelope. And so what we've said is, okay, if we can minimize that down, but then over ventilate using the dedicated outside air system, we can increase the ventilation rate, but pull it through a filter, pull it through energy recovery, go through dehumidification, and improve the learning space in the educational space. There was a federal high performance building standard that pushed for 250. We've always set a target on our projects at 150, because if the federal government says 250 is achievable, then I say 150 is achievable. And on this project, we actually met a 0.03, which I think is insanely low. So we had a 95% reduction in air infiltration on that concrete building. And I think it happened for one main reason, and that is we pressure tested the mock-up and it failed miserably. And failure is always your chance to learn. And what happened was the constructability of the systems was good, but in ordering components and attachments, some of the adhesives, some of the bonding, some of the things that were being done were misordered and misapplied. And when we pressure tested the mock-up and the failure happened, they drilled through in 4-inch cores and then did a quick pressure test looking for the leakage and found the problems and investigated and found the wrong attachments and the wrong components and fixed it on a small $20,000 mock-up, rather than having a full building that pressure tested wrong and had that problem. So when we pressure tested the actual building itself, it really did great. We just did, I'm gonna bring this up quickly, I hope. We just did a pressure test for Baltimore City is getting ready to open up 2 zero energy buildings that we were lucky enough to design and commission. And our commissioning team is a pretty robust team. They do the pressure testing in-house as well. And we pressure tested that, and it pressure tested at a 0.05. These are insulated concrete form buildings. These are 2 sister buildings in Baltimore. And the architect, the owner, both independently called me on a Saturday to talk about how excited they were that the building pressurization test came through so well. So, that's, you're getting you're getting a very well-educated architect and owner when they're looking at the building pressure test, and they're really excited to see how it performs. These are really simple tests. Here's a picture of the doors and the building exhaust fans, the building, the door fans that are put in to positively pressurize and then negatively pressurize the building so that we can test it. And anyway, so I thought that was a good example to run through. I will say that the goal of the pressure test is always to improve the envelope. It's not just to find problems, it's to fix the problems. So as our group goes through, they try to pull a spray foam contractor or some type of envelope contractor with them and to put their fingers on where the key spots that we're having major leakages and then improve them. I don't care if it's the best building that ever pressure tested or the worst building. I want to know where those issues are and then dive into those and see if we can, construction like this, you're just always going to have some type of problem unless you can pressure test those components and see, where those overlaps are. And so just, I thought a good example of with what we're seeing for lessons learned. All right. So those are successful strategies. Any discussion that you guys are wanting to chat about here?
Well, Tony, Julia Farber from LeGrand did offer up a couple of questions and comments, and I think her first question actually must have been inspired by your comment that you're not going to win all the wars, so you pick your battles. But then you also just discussed, mock-ups that have failed miserably, but opportunities for fixing. So her question is, I think, fascinating. And maybe you can answer it on the spot or not, but what project has been the most shocking or surprising in terms of their success, and what led to it? What led to their success?
Which project? See, now, Julia, that's not a fair question because then I have to pick my favorite owner. No, I'm just kidding. So a little bit of a Simon Sinek fan, and I think that attaching to the why of the building is huge. And so we've been able to achieve great things when we've worked with a group, say a new headquarters, and we're connecting with their vision statement as a company. We CMTA, we convinced our ownership to go for WELL certification on our building because our vision statement talks about how our employees are our biggest asset. And so I will say that the Discovery Elementary project, we really got lucky on that project that they were really trying to grab the data of a zero energy and then use that to teach. And it connected to the why of the building. They hired a new principal that had that in mind. She started hiring staff that wanted to try to do that. And for the last 3.5 years, just the things they have done are ridiculous. They've now gone to what they call Dark Fridays, and they turn off all that. So we did a robust daylighting design on that project. And here's this top left picture here, if you all can see. So B1 on the grid. We control glare so that we don't have people pulling down blinds that never get pulled up. We used a lot of solar tubes getting daylighting deep into the classroom, and we balanced the daylighting across the classroom. And so now they shut down, if it's a decently daylit day, they just shut off all their classroom lights every Friday of the year. And then they give out homework assignments, and they use the lighting energy consumption for the day as parameters in the homework. So second graders may have what was the difference in lighting energy between today and yesterday? And why is that? And they'll explain that yeah, it was really bright today and we had great daylighting and we shut off all the classrooms and that's why we saved. But they have to do math as part of that. So they're writing it up. They have to draw a picture. So they really try to do intercurricular things. The second one, maybe a sixth grader, and the sixth grader may have to do percent difference calculations for daylighting on Fridays versus other days, and total consumption savings, total dollar savings given that they're paying 14 cents a kilowatt hour for energy. So every time I go into that building, I hear just different great things.
That's actually really cool. It's sort of an energy reduction strategy, but also then an opportunity for, you know, curriculum. So that's really cool. There are some other questions, but I think based on they're great, but they're more general. And I think maybe we should save those to the end, because your next section is lessons learned, which made zero energy possible. So I think we should revisit. There's some good questions coming up about modeling for climate risk, the impact of a pandemic on ventilation strategies, financing and renewables, just to give you a flavor of some of those comments.
Yes.
So we can.
I will tell you that I have to jump in on Jim's comment because it's so good. Okay. And then we can hit the other things. And I think people want to talk about this. So start thinking about more questions. Jim asked, since COVID, are we finding our customers want more ventilation than ever before? And as an educated operator, how do we understand the ventilation increase is only required when people are potential contaminants? So how do we control per ASHRAE 62.1, the ventilation code? And, you know, it's a really interesting discussion and topic. We've been pushing increased ventilation in educational spaces for a long time. The project I showed with Baltimore City, their 2 zero energy schools, they asked this same question, and we showed them that that the increased ventilation only raised the EUI by 2 EUI, and that our building, and this is dependent on unit selection and where you're at, but that building design, we over ventilated the educational spaces by 42% on that project. So here's a zero energy building that hits that increased ventilation requirement. We have UVC lights in the heat pumps, the geothermal ground source heat pumps. We added some bipolar ionization in some of the areas that help. Both of those things help with the COVID kill rates. And then the increased ventilation really helps with the dilution that ASHRAE is looking for. So I think that doing that, but then using demand control ventilation so that the building shuts itself down is a good strategy.
And Tony, the other key point to that is managing humidity, which is the part that people are not doing quite well in educational facilities, because humidity is the medium by which these bacteria or these products are actually being conveyed. So after hours is the ideal time to actually look at the humidity in your building, and that's the ideal time to manage your ventilation and manage your humidity, as well as when people are there, but you can get more dynamic at night.
Yeah, and unless you have that type of high performance building, you're not going to be able to do both. If you've got an older designed building and you start running the OA system 100%, or we're recommending 2-hour flush outs pre and post occupancy to really flush out any contaminants that may be in the building, such as COVID-19. And if you're doing that during a hot, humid time and your building can't overcome that, then that's an issue. Second thing is people are starting to open windows, which you do not want to do. You really want to look at bringing in your outside air through your dedicated outside air system, through the ventilation system, and pull it through dehumidification, pull it through your filters, control and do energy recovery on those things, then distribute it out to the classroom. So good points.
Tony, I have to jump in. My sense of that is the weakest link in all of those control sequences tends to be sensing. And with the VE process, systems that provide the best sensing get whacked.
It's true. It's true. And you can't make a building so complicated that the owner can't use that. And so we've tried to go to CO2 sensors that are good, tried and tested CO2 sensors, and try to minimize where you're using that and how you're controlling off of it. We have offices that really like advanced sensing systems, and have had great results out of that, and they continue to use those. You have to look at, does it fit this project and can I get it in budget? And so, yeah, it comes down to a project by project basis. I don't think that one that one technology is a reason to throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? I think you can achieve that and you can tackle that and do it in both ways. We do think that we've always pushed on increased ventilation and increased natural light. Two things that the CDC said, yes, this is what we need to help fight this. You know, we need that natural light coming in. We need more increased ventilation for dilution. And so I think those are key things. Secondly, having flexible systems that where you can change the filter and the MERV rating in that filter has been huge. Having systems that turn over that air. So I think that's a big piece. Good discussion. Michael's asked, are the EUI values you're showing before or including on-site energy? Can you estimate the delta for some of the projects you've discussed? So all the EUI numbers that I'll give are all on-site energy consumption. And we're only talking about zero energy projects here. So the production is designed. So how we design production goals is we recommend you design the renewable energy system to have 10% overproduction. And we do that for a few reasons. One, we like the goal of overproducing, and most school systems don't have huge, robust maintenance departments that are watching every school all day, every day. And so renewable energy arrays, maybe you get a lightning strike that blows a fuse and it shuts down systems. In Ohio, we did a police station, and it had what's the violent crimes division in the police station, and you had to have a high security clearance to get in the building, and our commissioning guys couldn't get in to do some of the performance verification after the building opened. And 4 months into the project, we found out that the solar arrays, that a third of the solar arrays had been shut down due to a lightning strike and had been off for 4 months. And so I think that looking at 10% over design on PV allows you to get that system checked and watch out in case some things do get shut off. And also there is a degradation in solar panels over time that'll start to pull that down a little bit. So, but all the EUI numbers we'll give will be design numbers. So people ask, you know, what the biggest lesson learned, and I think for our group, we've been tracking energy consumption of our buildings for a dozen years, and creating a good, robust energy tracking system on all of your signature projects, like, I could not recommend that more. I think owners are starting to pay attention to what is the EUI of my buildings. It's like looking at your miles per gallon. I don't know how many people know what the miles per gallon was on their car when they were, you know, their first car when they were in high school or just into college. But today's driver knows exactly what they're getting. Some of the cars have meters right on the dash that says what you're getting, right? And that's the evolution of today's building owner. So we look at, this is a typical building here. This is one of our typical tracking systems. And we'll put in the energy model of what is the building supposed to do each month. And then as we get the bills in, we'll look at that and say, okay, how is it really doing? And we'll look for trends on what's causing that to go high or low. But 1, 2, 3, 4 months into building consumption, you start to get a feel for where is this projected, giving the model. So anybody that wants a spreadsheet, I'll send it to you. But we just interpolate the data throughout the full year and get a predicted EUI so that you can follow that through the year. We're showing what the typical building is per the AIA, what's the 2030 reduction, and then what's the designed EUI, where are we year to date, and what are we projected to. This is really big for us. What did we design the project to perform at, and then where did it actually hit? and then we pull lessons learned off of that and then feed it into the next project. I talked a lot about how good models are, and I'll go ahead and quote Fauci on that models are good, but as soon as you get in data, you modify your model. So I think that that important step of getting that data and pushing it back in, we see buildings all the time where someone did a zero energy study, they used a really simple energy modeling tool, and they came back out and said, oh yeah, all the systems we're using are your pretty standard systems, but here we are, we're gonna get the most energy efficient convention center in the country, right? And you just have to ask yourself, you know, is this really gonna happen? So really getting the data and pulling that out is important. On renovations, we set a guaranteed goal, and then often we're tracking what is that baseline. So this is part of our energy tracking database system. And then every time we go to do a project, we'll punch in the database, okay, what similar projects do we have towards that? And how did those buildings perform? And what systems did they have on that? So we were asked the other day just to give the number of buildings that were under 35 EUI. So we punched that into the system and what was the total square footage, and our database sort of spits out, you know, 120 buildings, 11.2 million. We're still in the middle of putting the majority of our buildings in. So I think this is really low compared to what's really going on. All right, I'm going to jump to some questions. Julia,
yeah, there are a lot of them have been well, no, there's a lot of them coming in, which is great, because that was the intention of the session. And I just wanted to say that earlier on, Tony mentioned that if he doesn't get to all of the questions, you could follow up with email or in a fashion. So because I think we've got quite a few, but hopefully I've given you some time to scan them and see which ones you can address now versus in the roundtable.
Yeah, I'll just pull up what's on my screen here. Michael said thinks it's helpful. Benefit on demand cost reduction. Yes, Michael, I can give you some data on demand cost reduction. I think that it's often missed that groups don't look at the rate structure. So for years, I didn't pay attention to rate structure when I'm designing, say, a high school campus, and I would go ahead and feed the football field off its own electrical feed. And I can't tell you, almost all high school campuses are done this way. And the owner is getting killed on demand costs for the majority of those campuses. And you can increase the installation costs and usually get sometimes a 6-month savings return on investment to hide that demand cost in the load of the high school itself. So hide that demand curve. So we use that approach. We look at the rate structure and then look at those demand curves and see where we can hide demand curves in an overall field. Julia asked a question right along the same piece, is what are you doing for smart grid integration, and is that separate? So we've been pushing this and haven't been able to get a lot of traction until we connected with the why of the building. And so we just finished a community center where it didn't have a back door. It was really visible to the community on all sides. And so we eliminated the chiller by going underground with geothermal, and we eliminated the emergency generator and switched over to 2 battery packs. One that was a lead acid just for some emergency lighting, and then a second, a larger, more robust building integrated smart battery system. And our guys are really going crazy about this. They can't wait. The building turns on at the end of August. And we've designed a control system for the switchgear package, for the transfer switch, for the battery system, for the PV, and the building load components. And then we tiered the building loads based on owner priority. And so a few things can happen. We can look at they're on a rate structure that has a high demand rate. So we can use the battery system to clip high peaks and really start saving a lot of money there. We're going to do that. We're also going to look at sort of a forecast on production and say, okay, we really look like we're going into a couple good days of sunlight. Let's go ahead and minimize our energy consumption by switching over to the battery system as much as we can. So we're going to do that. And then it's got some great resiliency. We think that this building will operate indefinitely given a major outage. So, you know, a huge storm comes through and an ice storm in the middle of the winter, and it shuts down all the power for the county for a month or 2 months. And we think that we can tier the loads, use some of the systems for low heat, turn on some critical systems and some plug loads, and keep the building up and operating as a shelter indefinitely using the renewable system. So we're excited about sort of having that toy to play with and starting to mess with that building a little bit.
Tony, you've gotten a few questions specifically about tracking.
Yes.
Steve asked about post-occupancy tracking. Is that something that CMTA provides to owners as an added cost service, or something CMTA does as an investment? And then that's followed up with some other questions about energy tracking requirements described and agreed upon in contracts between the owner and design team.
Stephen, that was a complex, fun question. So thank you for that.
Well, there was a couple, I layered a couple in together. I sandwiched them in together.
No, that was good. It was good. Stephen and I go way back. So I think that, yeah, we try to, so is it an added cost or not is a complex question, because so often we're trying to add value to the project, and where do we see those things that add value and are extra lifts? Some owners are going to pay for certain things when we know that they really have to happen. And so everything that I've done as an added cost, I've also done as just part of the project. And so we've done a ton of post-occupancy. I was a real big fan of the Center for the Built Environment's post-occupancy system that they had, and until they started charging a lot of money for it. And I quickly became not as much a fan. So we wanted to do a pre and post occupancy on our own building using Cal Berkeley Center for the Built Environment's standard post occupancy evaluation. And it ended up, it was going to be like a $3,200 charge. And so we just used a pretty standard one and made most of the questions up, used SurveyMonkey, and did a full pre and post occupancy based off that. We've won the best building for owner comfort and control. That's the Built Environment's award that they give. We've had 2 of our projects over the years win that national award as the most livable building. There you go. That's the word I'm looking at. So I'm a big fan of that. But sometimes it's hard to get an owner to fork up $1,500 or so for you to do use that post occupancy study. But I'm a huge fan of going back and getting that data and tying it into design for the next project. So I think that's great. Do you find that energy tracking requirements are described and agreed upon in contracts between the owner and the design team? No, they're typically not. I'm honestly a huge fan of tracking. I'm not the biggest fan of the lead credit for using the International Measurement and Verification Protocol Level 3 for the post-occupancy tracking evaluation piece that they do. I think that doing a post-occupancy study and talking to owners about those things that bring value to them and doing that survey is really good. And then I think tracking your energy system and consumption in the individual breakouts. I want to see what the lighting did this month compared to the month before. Someone asked, I'm going to answer this question in the middle of this other question, or I'm going to attempt to. So if you go to discovery.cmtasphere.com, you'll get this project and this piece. And there's a handful of these that we have out. But let's go in the energy consumption of this building, and let's go back a few months and look at the energy consumption. And so, you know, why do I see value in just tracking energy consumption? Because I can go into these projects and say, am I getting good unoccupied shutdown? here's a building here where I can see where the weekends are. As I go from January to February, well, that was February, this is March, you can see when Discovery went into COVID, right? And, here's the weekdays, here we go as we start downshifting, and the peaks went from 1,800, 2,000 kilowatt hours, which is incredible for a 100,000 square foot building, by the way. And they started dropping down in the 600 range. If I go into March, you can really see that this building shut itself down. And if I look at the production versus consumption on these days, we go back to months and look at production versus consumption in those months. You can see that this building consumption is in yellow and production is in orange, and then the dark line is the net. And so the consumption, as we went into COVID, really dropped off, and this building was almost always overproducing. And so Discovery was averaging a 400 to 500% overproduction during the COVID times versus the consumption. And the owner just said, yeah, we really didn't do anything. It just sort of shut itself down. So I think it's a good example of a high performance building. So I don't know. There's a few of these systems out there that you can go to, and each school is the name, the beginning of this, and then the CMTA sphere is the end.
Right.
So I can pass those around afterwards.
Tony, just for a time check here, where are you in terms of other areas or topics that you definitely wanted to share with our group? We just want to make sure that you can get through the rest of your key slides, and people who want to stay for an open discussion can do that.
I think that I can skip some of this, but I do think that people are afraid of doing zero energy in a renovation. And I think that is the next frontier. We don't need to be tearing buildings down. Europe and the rest of the world's figured this out. And, building our cores to be robust and strong. And then if you have an update in technology and you can drastically lower your energy consumption and carbon usage, then that technology is out there. Here's 3 of our best in terms of renovations and drastic energy reduction on a really, really tight shoestring budget. I'll tell you, the Mansfield project, the VE component was really, really difficult. But we did get that project back in budget. It's going good. The Manchester Buckley Elementary is on a shoestring budget, and that project is extremely low budget and is churning along. And improving the educational environment, sealing up the building, and is going to hit zero energy. So I think there's ways to hit that. So I wouldn't let a renovation scare you. The Buckley project's a renovation. So I wanted to touch on that. I wanted to touch on, we're finally using ESCOs and guaranteed energy performance contracting to fund zero energy buildings. And so there's a case study on our website. If you go to CMTA and see if I had this up and pull up case studies and pull up Warren County schools. I won't go to it, it'll save you time, but go to case studies on our website. There's a great case study of using energy reduction on other projects to fund the renewable energy to make one of the new buildings zero energy. And I think that was sort of an outside the box thinking that can be, PPAs aren't always legal. And sometimes they get very complicated and fall by the wayside. They take a long time to do. And we're seeing energy consumption, guaranteed energy performance contracts as being a good way to do it quickly and for free. 2 things that owners like, right? And then I think we could hit any last minute questions if you'd like.
Well, I can, there's a few that came in, and then we can open it up and people can just talk openly, just unmute themselves. But Michael Sam had 2 questions and kind of he sent them at different times, but I just looking back on the chat, he asked if you have a links that for available building dashboards. So that might be something that you could just share with us or share with me, and I can send that out after the fact. And then he asked about, do you include energy storage in your projects? You know, how is that factored in relative to demand costs, you know, and management?
Yeah, so the one project that Julia asked about and that we talked about, the community center outside of DC, has good energy storage, and that one's getting ready to open. And then we have a living building certified, Living Future certified building for the Living Building Challenge. And so Living Futures is going to mandate the elimination of combustion, but also to help fix the the grid situation, creating a little bit of a microgrid and doing some energy storage back onto the system. So we've done that on a recent water quality lab for a higher ed client in Maryland. And if you can get your energy consumption down, it's not a huge cost. So it is a cost adder, obviously. You know, you're adding a system and a technology to a building, but I could get some pricing on that if Michael's interested in that. But I do like where that's going. So he asked about an estimate delta. So I'll dig the cost up for that project and look at the storage cost.
You also just touched on something. It's a question that Amy Musanti asked about. Do any of your zero energy projects that your team work on also pursue other high performance standards such as LEED, WELL, LBC, and Passive House? I actually thought I heard you say earlier, you mentioned a project that went for WELL, and then of course you just mentioned one, I think you just said Living Building Challenge, but that's just a great sort of open question about how these other things intersect with zero energy.
Yeah, my favorite way to approach this is to meet with the owner, look what their goals are, look what they're trying to accomplish with their building, and then after you start heading that direction of what you can achieve in budget, then see if there's a rating system that lines up with what they're trying to achieve. In doing that, we often see, you know, intelligent owners look at the health and wellness component and aspects, and there is good overlap between LEED and WELL. And so DC Public Schools is the first I've seen where we were able to get all the WELL components hit in budget, in their normal budget on their last zero energy school. It's an elementary school, West Elementary. It's in construction in the district. And so they now made that a mandate on all their projects going forward, which I think that's pretty fantastic. And then we see a little bit of an overlap with Passive House. Obviously, you're heading in the same direction. We've seen the Passive House push mostly on residence halls, right? And really trying to say, how can we be pretty robust there? I think Passive House pushes the envelope discussion to the bleeding edge and really mandates that high efficiency envelope and the very low air infiltration numbers. And so there really needs to be a great envelope consultant, you know, architect coordination there to be able to achieve those components.
Okay.
Fair enough.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
There were some other general questions. I think we have the possibility of allowing people to unmute at this point and talk openly. But early on, I think it was Julia who asked the question about that. No, we haven't really touched on yet, and that's whether or not you include climate modeling to incorporate or consider climate risk in your projects.
We have not. We have not. There is a great climate modeling group that we've worked with. Actually, they just showed up in Miami, in Florida, and in DC on separate projects, and they're grabbing you know, water level rise in Miami, and they're looking at the 1.5 C temperature rise in DC, and having us do a early resiliency study on those components. And they've both had impacts on the building. I think that the water rise discussion in Miami is huge. And so how do you look at doing an emergency operations center when you're looking at the water rise that they're going to see over 20 years in that area, unless we do something? And then in DC, the temperature rise component wasn't as big of an issue for a new high performance building that's minimizing air infiltration, it is a big issue for their existing buildings that have so much air leakage. So talking to DC about those issues is needs to be on the agenda.
Okay. And then another question that came up that I don't believe we've touched on yet had to do with financing. Typically for the renewable aspect, do you have any light you can shed on that?
So we gave a talk at one of the Zero Energy conferences last year on the 3 ways that zero energy buildings are being funded. You know, 1, trying to lower costs so you can afford the renewables themselves. 2, trying to do a power purchase agreement. And 3, looking at doing a guaranteed energy performance contracting. And sometimes it's hard to find the money inside the budget. I think if you get drastic energy reduction, what we've seen is that you can get the renewables in the 1 to 1.5% of the project budget. So really at that point, it just becomes, is it a big enough priority for the owner to own the renewables? And so that's an approach. The PPA needs to be very well coordinated. I can't say enough. Power purchase agreements are done by financial companies that are trying to make their money back within 5 years and then sell the assets typically. And so I think having an owner really understand the financial implications of a power purchase agreement is really, really important. It can be a great thing for the owner, and you can get some cost savings out of it. Typically that cost savings is really low, but that can accumulate over say a 15-year cycle. And then the guaranteed energy performance contracting piece, I think will become more and more robust. Owners are looking at their building stock where they're using a lot of energy and they can do quick renovations and create some energy savings. And being able to use that to fund a zero energy building, I think is a good use of funds. Especially if you're an educational building and you're looking to tie it to education, or you're a office building and you're looking to tie it to your mission and your core. Our employees love the fact that our buildings run in zero energy and they can pull it up every day and see how it's performing. So I think there's good options there for those type of financing schemes.
And Tony, one thing you've got to think about when you're doing those PPAs is how they monitor and perform how the system is running. Because many people who look at it from a financial perspective, if they can write the job off in 5 to 7 years, do they really care about how the system's going to last 10 to 15 years? So that continuous monitoring and performance of the system, as well as maintaining the system through the term of the PPA, is critical, and not enough people are doing that. And that's one of the things that I think people forget.
We had a district that we just did an evaluation for. They had 8 proposals, and all 8 showed huge huge cost savings through the life of the PPA. And we evaluated the rate structures, overlaid the building energy consumption, and our numbers showed that 6 of them actually had a negative savings or were flat, and 2 of them did have some cost savings, but it was it was relatively low compared to what they had projected. And so if you've got demand costs as part of your rate structure, then you're not going to have your solar is not going to peak at the same time that your energy building is going to peak. You have 2 complex energy profiles, and you're trying to overlay those profiles, and those profiles are going to go up and down at different times, and you're going to get energy consumption peaks. And the 2 are not going to overlay perfectly. It's just not going to happen.
The reason I bring it up is I built a school in Massachusetts where we put a 50 kW PV system on the roof, and we bought it and we owned the system outright. So we didn't have the dynamic monitoring system, but what we did have is very dynamic students who are running the analytics, and they found out that from 12:30 every day, for some reason, the solar production dropped till about 1:30 in the afternoon, and they actually went out and started doing the diagnostics and found out we had a series of branches that were causing a shadow across the solar panel. They found out, we got it fixed, we got it remediated, and they increased production. But you don't always have that. There are a few companies out there who do this automatically, but that's why I say that dynamic monitoring of the systems, of course, actually building it with the students finding it makes it even better.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's some great lessons learned in the student component. Yep. Great idea. Great comment.
Yeah, the other thing I was going to mention, and maybe Jim can actually speak to this since he's in Massachusetts, is there's certain funding for school buildings where they're asking for a bond over a longer period of time so that they can actually get the financing. Like you were saying, a guaranteed energy performance is included in the bond. So they're not actually asking for a larger bond than they would for a normal project because they're including, maybe it's like 10 years of operation and the construction in one bond.
Yeah, they do offer that up here. The state, basically the simple guideline for the state of Massachusetts is they came up with a certain dollar value for the type of school. For example, in 2005, we finished the high school. So it was a few years ago. And at the time, it was $268 a square foot is what they allocated for high schools of that type. And at the time, that's all the state would allow us for their reimbursement rate. At that time, my school was about 68% reimbursed from the state. We were allowed to go 20 years because we actually did quite a bit with the renewables. We actually put the 50 kW in the roof. We actually met the green requirements. We followed all the LEED guidelines. We made a conscious decision as a school department not to go for LEED because we didn't want to have to pay for the certification process, but we followed the guidelines, if that makes sense. That was a conscious decision our school committee made, although we could have been a LEED qualified school without a problem. And then continuously monitoring it, the National Renewable Energy Lab has actually sent students up there now over the last 10 years, 5 times, to monitor the energy use in the building because of all the dynamic stuff we built into it. And it's fascinating what they're finding is the building is actually getting more efficient over time because we actually have Mass Maritime has students. The state has a program where they'll actually have students come in and spend the summer there and going through and tuning the HVAC as part of their energy program. So we have students actually doing the dynamic monitoring of the system, and we're always getting a little better. And the thing is, having the system in place, as you talked about, the way of monitoring it, we're doing it all through the building management system. And yes, I work for Siemens, but this was a Johnson system because at the time, that's what they had in all the schools. But at the same time, all the systems can do it. But as you talked about, we went with a very simple system. I have an occupancy sensor in every classroom. That sets the VAV box into unoccupied mode when no one's in the classroom. We have daylight control. Every classroom, the building was built in a square with a courtyard in the middle, so we had natural light in every classroom. All the science classrooms are facing east, so they had the morning sun. The mathematics and art, ironically, are on the north side, so they don't have the daylight coming in. It actually is better for that type of structure. The library was facing south. It actually makes the process a little better. And the gym was on the west side. But it's the way the whole building worked out. It was really thought out really well. And we even had the east-west orientation laid it out by the DO2 model when they modeled it, so they match it all together. But you have to take that time up front to do it. And all that stuff, the new building, and I love using this analogy. The old building was 186,000 square feet. The new building was 235,000 square feet. The old building was 30% air conditioned. The new building is 100% air conditioned. Ironically, the new building uses about $100,000 a year of energy less than the old building. Yet it's getting more efficient as time goes on. So what you said earlier is key, but also trying to keep things simple and put things together. We're not a zero energy building, but we're a very green building.
Yeah, and I think that the improvement piece you talked about is huge. I mean, rarely do you see buildings that get better with time. Discovery is like that. It started out at above a 16 and got down to a 14.5 EUI, and it's rare. But they've tied that to curriculum, and they're teaching based off of it. 4th, 5th, and 6th graders have like a capstone sustainability lesson that a project that they have to do at the end of each year based on the building and the sustainability of the building. And I don't see that being done at a 4th, 5th, and 6th grade level. It's just fantastic. So no, those are great examples that you give. Any other questions?
If anybody wants to unmute themselves, you can go ahead.
Tony, someone just asked for your contact information, and I thought, well, that's normally a slide at the end. So I mean, if you're going to show another slide, that's great. I think, yeah, there you go. Well, there's your website, but
my email is tony@cmta.com. So I will tell you the most successful thing I've ever done for my company is I went and negotiated the purchase of cmta.com about 2 years ago. So the Country Music Trade Association has always had cmta.com, and it just drove me crazy for the last whatever years. And so I said, okay, I'm gonna go meet with these guys. And if anybody ever, you know, everyone's always looking for an excuse to go to Nashville, right? So it was a good excuse to go to Nashville. But yeah, so I'm Tony at cmta.com. Any questions, I'll go through and send some components up. I've been spending a lot of time. Our Boston office is out the west side, so we're about an hour and 20 from Hartford, and so I'm up in the New Haven and Hartford area quite a bit in the area, and having a lot of fun. Our guys from Boston and girls from Boston are down a lot more. Kirsten, Jess, and Kevin and Brian are help run the Buckley, Manchester, and Mansfield projects. And so those guys are there a little more than I am. I put in a slide on COVID and some of the discussion, but anything anybody wants to, it's been a busy day. I gave it an hour and a half on schools reopening for the A4LE South this morning. So it's a long webinar day, but a lot of fun. I enjoy doing these, and it distracts you from building design for a little bit. So it's a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for being here and answering people's questions.
Yeah, and thank you for everyone for participating. It was really, we had a lot of excellent participation on the chat through the whole session, which was the goal. I think we accomplished it. I think if it sounds like we don't have anything else, any other burning questions, I think we could call that a wrap for this evening.
Good job, thank you.
Oh, good. There's Ross. Thank you, Ross.
Enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Take
the
care,
invite.
everybody.
Yeah, thanks for the invite, guys. See you soon.
Bye, Julia.